Hello, everyone. I'm calling the Policy and Personnel meeting to order. It is 6 o'clock. Michelle, may I have roll call, please?
Jacobs,
Here?
Wong,
Here.
Levy.
Here.
All members are present with Wong in the boardroom.
Thank you, Ms. Shope. May I have approval of the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the agenda. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved. And that takes us right to personnel items for September 29th, 2020 employment recommendations, Exhibit A, Section 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C. Do I have a motion?
I'm requesting that we go into closed session.
Okay.
So I make a motion this Policy and Personnel Committee convene into closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C of the Wisconsin State Statute relative to considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility.
I'll second that.
Go ahead, John.
I said I'll second that.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second to go into closed session. Michelle, roll call, please.
Levy,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Jacobs.
Aye. All right. We are going to go into closed session, so I will see everyone there in a few moments, and to the public, we will be back shortly. Thank you. Hello. It kept kicking me back. Sorry about that. All right, we are back at open session, and we are going to continue our discussion. Board Member Levy? Oh, excuse me. I see Board Member Miller.
Board Member Levy, would you like to start? I was just going to summarize my thoughts. Did you want to start?
You go right ahead. I'll go after.
Okay, sorry about that. I mean to be so quick at the keyboard. So my succinct question is, I'm curious in the job description, as it has now been clarified to me that there's a change in procedure and we're not approving new job descriptions at the board level. So now that I'm seeing this, I think for the first time, I'm curious where equity accountability is in the job description, since equity is in the job title. My concern is that the only discernible kind of equity measure that would be in the job description is in number 9. And I won't be brief, I will try to be brief. Briefly, it looks like, I closed this out, I closed out. Well, it talks about like providing support, I think, and instructional support and things like that, but there's nothing in there about like metrics. So my concern is in this job description, which is how we're gonna hold this position accountable, doesn't seem to me to be any actual equity accountability built into a position that has equity in the title, and that's deeply concerning to me. So could you shed some light on how that works kind of in the district? Where does that accountability lie?
Certainly, and I'll try to summarize, and I'll ask my colleagues to help me out with if I misrepresent something. So when there was a position, I believe it was executive director or assistant superintendent position or director of equity, when that position was eliminated, then the director of bilingual education actually has in the revised job description a specific line speaking towards the equity piece. But more specifically, and to the point when I was first hired, one of the pieces that the board asked for me to work on, and something that has just recently closed, is the RFP for the equity RFP. So that is being reviewed right now and coming back, and I fully intend to use that as part of overall district-wide strategy of saying, what is our approach for equity as a district? So the board and the superintendent, and then if we need to go back and reassign duties for that, we can relook at the job positions and say, now that we have a clear vision of what we mean by equity and we have some clear metrics that we want to achieve by equity, then we can assign those job responsibilities where they seem most fitting. So, i.e., in the area of teaching and learning, metrics that look at equity through the lens of curriculum would fit within the teaching and learning department. If we're looking at metrics in terms of human resources, then it makes the most sense that I work with human resources to do those pieces. So specifically for this position, my understanding is that there, in the job description for the director of bilingual education, there's an equity piece, and then the rest of it really would lie with myself and any duties that I would assign to this new person. And I'm going to turn it over to Miss Armstrong, because she's coming up to help me out.
Okay, Megan, I'm sorry, Board Member Miller, I understand where we had the changes I think that you were referencing is on the July 28, 2020 board personnel actions, they had changed the titles of many of the leadership team when Ms. Mellencamp was with us and Ms. Green was the interim superintendent. And One of the positions, the title was changed from Director of Equity, Bilingual, and Alternative Programs to the Director of Instructional Leadership and Equity. It is now the only director-level position in that school leadership team that has equity in the title and would be having those accountability measures reporting up to this executive director. So that would be the individual that is looking, in my perception, would be making sure that those equity standards are being followed, especially with the recent closing time of our equity RFP for equity services that Dr. Keyser has been working on. This would be an integral part in that for the school addressing that equity component as well.
And I can get that job description and forward it to the board in my weekly update, so.
I really appreciate you shedding light on that. Thank you so much for the very thorough explanation.
Board Member Levy, did you have any other questions?
I do, thank you. I was typing notes as Ms. Armstrong was speaking, and I apologize, but I missed the title of the individual that she said would be handling some of the equity work. So if someone could recap that for me. But my specific question is, when it comes to the Executive Director of Teaching, Learning, and Equity, one of the duties and responsibilities is to supervise and direct the district's instructional curricular programs, assessments, and pedagogical approaches in all campuses. So my question is there a plan for this position, the person in this position, that would include curriculum design that includes anti-racist pedagogy?
So I actually was just reading a draft of the department's curriculum design and review process, and they are revising it with lens of culturally and linguistically responsive best practices. I will have to reread it to see if they explicitly say anti-racist pedagogy as part of that. But I know that they are working on that as being a core of their curriculum design and review process, which it will be the process once that work is completed that will be the lens by which we bring all new curriculum reviews and updates to the board for either review or approval moving forward.
Thank you so much. And then the name of the position that is carrying some of the brunt of the equity work?
That is the Director of Instructional Leadership and Equity.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussions?
I think.
Can I just annoyingly lastly throw in a quick plug I really appreciate that we're looking at culturally responsive pedagogy. Do you think that we could, I don't know if, I would be curious in a superintendent report at some point if we're looking at all in culturally sustaining practices, because it's sort of like, it's different. It's like there's some substance that's different in culturally sustaining versus culturally responsive, and I think that would be really beneficial to our district. I'm curious if there's some discussion on that. Can look for it in an update. That would be amazing. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. Anyone else? All right, I'm looking for a motion. Do I have a motion to approve? The employment recs, anyone?
I move that we approve the employment rec for September 29th to move on to the full board later this evening.
I'll second that.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve the the employment recommendation, Exhibit A, Section 19.5, Parent 1, Parent C to the full board. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? All right, the motion carries. And we are now at adjournment. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, it is 6:31, so I'll call the special board meeting to order. May I have roll call, please?
Delgado. Delgado.
I had a question. So if we're still on that call, is the mic actually going through this next meeting? Because aren't we still in?
Just kidding, everybody. Can we go back to the policy and personnel regular board meeting? Thank you. All right, it is 6:35. Let's call the meeting to order. May I have roll call, please?
Delgado,
Present.
Larson,
Present.
Miller,
Present.
Wong,
Here.
Levy, Levy, Jacobs,
Here.
Anderson,
Here.
Levy,
Your mic's on. Do you hear us?
Hello.
Hello, Falcon. This is Doc.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I'll log out and try to come back in because I can't hear anyone.
Okay.
Okay. So everyone is present. Levy's logging off and coming back in 1 second.
Can someone say something?
How's that? You can hear okay
Perfect.
now?
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. May I have approval of the agenda, please?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Are there any questions or discussion regarding the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Brings us to the consent agenda. Item A on the consent agenda is social emotional learning curriculum for grades 9 through 12, and then the September 29th, 2020 employment recommendations, Exhibit A. Is there anything a board member wishes to remove from the consent agenda, or is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move
Like,
to approve. Hello? Did you move?
great minds think alike. You go ahead, Board Member Jacobs.
Oh, why, thank you. Board Member Miller, I make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Are there any other questions or discussion regarding the consent agenda? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda is approved. The next item on the agenda are updates, Keeler Avenue property sale update and Lee Lane property sale update. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
Sure. So I would like to make a motion to convene the Board of Education into closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, Parent 1, Parent E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session.
Second.
We have a motion, a second to go into closed session. Are there any other questions or discussion?
I'm sorry, I have one, President. Mr.
Yes.
President,
Yep.
when we go into the closed session, do we go back to the email of the closed session, one, and then come back to the policy?
Yep, we are going to use the special board meeting closed session and then come back to the regular policy and personnel link.
Thank you for the clarification.
No problem. Any other questions or discussion about closed session? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Anderson,
Aye.
Delgado,
Aye.
Jacobs,
Aye.
Larson,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
The motion carried. We will now convene into closed session.
Just me and you, Monica.
Well, hello there, Missy.
And Dean, I suppose. I
Well,
hope,
there's no John's there.
All right, we are back in open session. Are there any motions?
I move that we proceed with the Keeler Avenue property as discussed.
I second.
We have a motion, a second, to proceed with the Keeler property as discussed. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Is there another motion?
I move that we move forward with the Lee Lane property as discussed in closed session.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second to proceed with the property on Lee Lane as discussed in closed session. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
I abstain.
Thank you. So that's 6 ayes and 1 abstention. The motion carries. Thank you very much. That looks, appears as though we've completed all the business for our special board meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn the special board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, a second to adjourn. Any questions or discussions regarding adjournment? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We are adjourned. All right. Does anybody need a minute?
We're staying in this Google Meet, is that correct?
Yes, we're going to stay in this Google Meet.
Thank you.
But does anybody need time to take care of personal needs? Okay, we're gonna take a couple of minutes before we start the next meeting. Stephanie, are you back?
I am.
Maria?
Yes, I am.
Okay, it looks like we're just waiting for Megan. All right, it is 7:38 and we're going to go ahead and start the board workshop. So we're going right into our district goals. So Dr. Keys, are you going to take over? Sure.
Certainly. Thank you, Board President Larson. So what I brought back to the board this evening was taking the 5 strategic goals that were discussed over the past 2 board workshops around the short-term goals, and then building out a district goal. And I would say these are a draft form of the first 100 days. So just to give context to the board as to the approach, I and the executive directors sat down and we looked at what was the strategic goal, and then what are the things that would move that strategic goal forward, and then take a lens of what would be accomplished within that year. So the first strategic goal is a little bit not the best one to start with, because it's talking about the needs of the child during a pandemic. And so we're hoping, knock on wood, that the pandemic will sunset at some point during this year, and it will not be a long-term goal. But the other goals are certainly multi-year goals, and so the focus is on what we would accomplish in this first year. The reason for the 100 days is to think about breaking your cycle into smaller chunks that then you can have a chance to come back and review and make adjustments as you move forward. So when we think about a 100-day cycle, we're thinking about September through November. Then you would have, because December is a short month, that would be time for recalibration and adjustments if needed. January through March, again, spring break, having a little bit of an adjustment period, and then the last part of the year going into the summer. And so as we go through these 5, we wrote the strategic goals as an if-then statement. So if we do something, then a certain something will happen, and then trying to ensure that all the elements of SMART, so specific, measurable, attainable, time-bound, are all encapsulated within that if-then statement. This is what we call a theory of action. And a theory of action allows for, one, flexibility, but also the specificity of what are we going to be spending our time doing for a particular end result. The mindset that we went into this was, if we are here 1 year from now, what will be different than if we spent significant time and effort on that particular goal? The outcome that I'm hoping for is that we go through these 5, get clarifications, and then through the board's discussion, determine which 2 we want to move forward with. That isn't to say that the remaining 3 are any less important and are not going to get done. It's just that to fully build these action plans out, we would want to involve the appropriate departments and director levels below the executive director level to ensure that we really build out robust action plans. So we would take this and build more depth into this. So with that, let's take a look at that first strategic goal. The academic and social emotional needs of a child during a pandemic. Our district goal is, if we establish clear universal approaches and expectations for academic and, I apologize for the acronym, social emotional learning needs during the 2021 school year, then 75% of students will be at Tier 1 engagement and 75% of grades will be at a C or better. So here we're talking about the approaches and expectations that we would, our teaching and learning and pupil services team would be communicating out and working with our principals and principals with teachers so that we would be monitoring engagement, which is something that have been communicated out with principals around things like attendance, work completion, and so forth. And then using our Skyward system, monitoring grades and doing a grade distribution to determine if our students are meeting those thresholds. Below are the action steps in the first 100 days, and then the key results. Some key results have happened. Some would be moved forward because they may not be done by September and we're going into October and so forth. And where we have an action step, for instance, the first one, in September we had kind of 2 key results. So instead of repeating that action step, we just left it blank right below there. So questions?
Do you mind building the questions, Dr. Kaiser, because I'm presenting?
Certainly. Board Member Levy.
Thank you, Dr. Kieser. A couple of things. One, if you could provide some more context, it made me very uncomfortable to read goals formed in an if-then statement. Any goal setting I've ever done has been more definitive or declarative, like I will accomplish, not if I do this, then that. So if you could kind of give some more context behind the thought of wording it that way. And then I know that we discussed selecting 2. In my opinion, all 5 of these are very important. So my question is, what about the other 3 initiatives that are not fully going through this formalized process? How will the work towards those be evaluated?
So I'll take the second part first because that helps give a little bit of context. So I think in thinking of moving the work forward, if we say that if all of the initiatives are important, then you diminish the focus, time, and effort that you can apply to those goals. So it's not saying that we're prioritizing 2 means that the other 3 are any less important. All of these things are important and all of these things need to be done. It's just that if we want to move the district forward, really what we're saying is we're picking two of the goals that we feel collectively have the greatest lever to move the district forward significantly. So if we pick 2 of the goals and we spend a extra amount of effort on them, the desired result is that a year from now, we have made improvements on that, which have then ripple effects across our system in other areas. The other three goals still are important goals that work needs to be done on, but if we have to make a decision between prioritizing something between two different things, we're going to prioritize the goals that we've established that we feel collectively are going to have the greatest amount of impact on our overall system. So hopefully that gives a little bit of context to that one. Did that help before I move on to the if-then statement?
No, thank you for pausing. No, my question is, and I completely get we're going to select two, and that's fine. But since you commented that work will still be happening on the other three because we all agree that all five are important, my question is, how are the three goals that are not highlighted or however you want to frame it, like how will those initiatives be evaluated? How will we check in and know that we have made progress in those areas, the three that are not selected as our focus goals?
And I would say in the most immediate kind of visible terms would be we've already spent a lot of time building out these action plans for these as drafts, so we can still use these action plans as a roadmap to move forward with. It's just that if we pick two of these, we would take the initial action steps and we would go through and continue to build those out. The other three, we would say, these are goals that we already have action steps, and we can still execute on all of those action steps. But we're just not going to take the time this year to really build those out any further than what we've already done. So we would still use the metrics that we've established here. We just wouldn't wouldn't bring those back to the other teams to go deeper and go deeper in the action planning phase of it.
And I don't want to belabor the point. So does that mean, like, for example, you won't build it out any further, but the work that already has been done would be assigned to staff and embedded in their evaluation?
Correct.
That would be how okay, perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Correct. Yep. We would still assign what we've gotten done, and then have those individuals that we assign it to continue to move the work forward as part of their work streams, but we wouldn't take it up to the level where the executive team and myself would be reviewing it as frequently as we would the goals that we determine here tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and to the Gesundheit. To the if-then statement. So when writing it in this fashion is taking it from the standpoint of a theory of action. And the reason why you write it as a theory of action is because through a theory of action, you can actually through your action steps, develop a problem of practice. For instance, in this example here, so we say universal approaches and expectations for academics and social emotional learning. So we have some common expectations that we have as far as systematizing our curriculum and our approach to social emotional learning. So we heard a presentation where we have Second Step as our social emotional learning resource to carry out the social emotional competencies that the state had developed. And we added a resource at the high school in 7 mindsets. So those common expectations around social emotional learning are set, and we have a set resource. Now, as we go through and we take a look at those resources and we measure them against something like engagement, which is measured by 75% of students attending their classes and turning in their homework regularly. If we see those things are not happening, we do a root cause analysis. If we feel that there is a discrepancy between the curriculum or the resource and the outcome, we can develop what we call a theory or a problem of practice. And so we can do an in-depth, like a mini research or action research to dig into that problem and determine, is it the expectation? Is it the curriculum? Is it the resource? Or is it something that isn't related to any of those things? It's something we hadn't thought of. So writing it as an if-then statement allows a point of view that says, we know that we're working in a complex system. We feel that setting these sets of parameters will yield these level of results. But we also know that if those things aren't happening, we have a methodology by which we can go and investigate and determine, is it A, B, C, or something that we hadn't even considered. So that's the reason why I write it as an if-then statement, as opposed to, we will establish these things using these resources to establish these results during this time period. By having it as a declarative sentence, it kind of says, because we do A and B, we're going to get C as a result in this time frame. And the research really says that can be an overly simplistic view to the end user. Doing it this way kind of comes at it from a researcher's point of view that allows for more discussion and investigations.
Thank you for providing context.
Let's see here. Board Member Jacobs.
Thank you, Dr. Peaser. So on the first, the academic and social emotional needs, I caught where you said under the action steps for the first 100 days. For the second, where it says school leadership, and then it was blank. For that second blank
Yes?
box. Okay. So why are the other ones blank in the rest of the rubric?
So in that first action step where it says school leadership will develop a framework for academics, next to that, we would say that by the end of September, one of the results we would expect from this action step is that we would define and refine with the cabinet how we're going to measure student engagement. But also, student leadership would define and refine with principals, with principal input, the instructional model. Those two items directly relate back to this first action step. So instead of just repeating the action step below, that's why I left it blank. The work of refining an instructional model needed to happen in order to start school. So it really doesn't need to be carried beyond September. That's why those boxes next to it are blank. So where you see blanks are where we don't expect things to necessarily end date. If you go second from the bottom where we say educate staff on adolescent mental health in order to recognize trauma, the outcome of around training, that training is ongoing from now, and we expect the end result to be by the end of November. So instead of just putting it in all, like trying to break it out and say, we'll have 3% here and 6% here and 10% here, we just said, by this date, we expect this end result. If we get done early, fantastic. But it kind of gives you a little bit of a timeline. So it's kind of like project management layout.
Okay. I thank you. And a couple others. I see 9 through 12 mentioned. I see adolescent. I see K-12. Are all of these for all grade levels?
So our expectation is universal. So across our entire system, there are some things in terms of, for instance, establishing the universal social emotional learning curriculum and supports. By the end of September, we needed to establish, review the second step, but then also have a high school curricular resource for 9-12. So where it needs to be specified, that's where we put it. Otherwise, we can assume that we're dealing with it across our entire district, elementary, intermediate, and high.
Okay, and thank you. And then one more question. Why is it 75%? Why isn't it 100?
We're being mindful that not 100% of our students get C's or better. We know that 75% is a stretch goal. While we are putting together data systems. It's one of the systems and structures that I've been evaluating as I'm transitioning in here. My most recent guesstimate in going into Skyward is last spring we were below the 75% in this category. And again, some people say a passing grade. D's and higher are passing. Here we're setting a very strict standard of a C is passing, where in our policies we say an F is failing and anything that isn't an F is a passing grade. So we're trying to set a high bar and set a stretch goal. The reality is going to be, as we start to dig into this, we may find one of three things. Either this is a really significant stretch goal, this is a reasonably established stretch goal, or we lowballed it and we're already exceeding, in which case we need to make an adjustment. We'll find that out as we go through the work.
Okay, that makes sense. And then the 75% of students at Tier 1 engagement. So when as I'm reading that, then to me, when it's 75% of students will be at Tier 1 engagement, I'm assuming that means our 4K through 12th grade, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then 75, okay, so then I get the 75% of grades will be at C or above, even though to me those are almost kind of two different goals or a subset. But I still think, personally, I think 75% of students at Tier 1 is too low. I understand that, when we're in school, we always go for 100%. We do our very best. It doesn't always happen, but that's our goal. So I guess even though I'd hate to see our expectations any lower, even if they're not in school. That's my personal comment, and I don't know. I know that high expectations are critical, especially for our kids.
No, I appreciate the feedback. In part, the 75% on the engagement piece is really coming from our RTI model, where we expect in a normal, organized and refined system, 80% of our students would be accessing universal. 15% of our students are accessing universal and need a little bit more support. And then 5% of our students are accessing universal and needing some significant support. And so that's kind of where that piece came from. The 75% of grades, this is just two metrics. So we're using these as two litmus tests to say, are we making the mark with that?
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Board Member Miller.
Thank you, and thanks for explaining all the thought that you put into this. I think it's important for us to set goals that that are responsive to where our students are, but I think a question that our community might have would be, how does this goal compare to kind of what's happening in surrounding districts? And if you could, I don't know if do you have that answer, or if you could explain kind of where we are in our journey and kind of what the plan and the goals are. I know I think some folks might be curious.
Yeah, so I have not looked at what other surrounding districts have set for their board goals around their strategic frameworks in regards to this. The executive directors and myself looked at the strategic goal and said, okay, if we're looking at meeting the needs during this pandemic, what are the metrics that we would want to establish, and what are the expectations that we have set? So building with what we know we're going to do in mind, and how are we going to measure that? So that was the approach. To the larger question, the short-term goals have been developed through the collective conversation of board members and myself around what are some things that we want to work on right now, with the eyes looking forward to having a strategic plan. Really, the strength of this work is enhanced when we know what that forward-looking plan is. So this work will significantly be changed and enhanced once we have that strategic planning process moved forward, because then we will know exactly as a collective. So as a board, what is it that we're trying to strive for as a district? And then as the superintendent, how do I take that vision from the board and make it a reality for our district? Those cascade down to the work streams and the ways that I hold the executive directors and their directors. And it also helps align the work at the school level when they do their root cause analysis, looking at their data and saying, here are the gaps that we're seeing in our buildings, and we see where the district as a whole wants to go, and how do we grow from the classroom level up and from the board level down and meet somewhere in the middle so that these things align. The ideal is where we can draw a through line from a classroom teacher's EE all the way up to a district goal, and we can see the connections all the way along that arc. So it does seem a little bit disjointed when you look at these individually, but it's the process that's important at this stage, because once we have that future vision, this process will make that future vision a lot more actionable.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yep. Board Member Wong.
Thanks for that explanation that you just gave, and also on the stretch goal analysis, because I think that it's important. Obviously, if there's a goal and you're going to be able to reach it pretty easily, it's not really a goal in my opinion. But as I was looking over these and seeing where we are for this year with the pandemic, and not knowing when we might be back in person, whether it's October, December, January, or March, for all we know. We don't know at this point. I'm also a firm believer when we establish goals, and you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, that this is a collective effort, because I think that the more people that have buy-in to it within the team, it's more of a team effort. And I don't want to have this be just a board decision, a top-down directive that is sort of and I understand that that's part of our job is to guide you, but I also respect the fact that we're not on the ground every day in the classrooms with our school district and understanding what our needs are. So with that being said, you've had this discussion with your executive committee. Out of these 5 goals, have there been 2 that have come to light, or maybe 3, that you say these 3, or it's been collectively stated that these 2 are going to have the greatest impact this year on our student body, pandemic, no pandemic?
That's a great question, and not to shortchange the conversations, but what I hear you asking is, like, when I and the team look through these 5, what are ones that have the greatest lever moving forward. I would say the ones that have the greatest lever moving forward are the ones that are what are conversations that we've already had at the board level. I think I strongly feel that literacy is a key skill that from the time that children are born all the way up through to they enter kindergarten, and then from kindergarten, we know the research through third grade is critical, but even well beyond that. So pandemic, no pandemic, the strategic goal around identifying where our greatest literacy gaps are and addressing those, I think is, I would say as the executive directors and myself, that one we identified very easily as number one. And then another one that we've talked about that I think also goes to cuts across our system is around staff. So when we think about staff retention, we see elements of climate and culture in there. We also see elements of if we're retaining staff, we can spend more time and effort in recruitment and things as simple as if we don't have the turnover that we have, then we can start to ask the staff, what makes Beloit different than other districts? If we find out that we've had staff that have been heavily recruited and they have stayed here, those are the individuals we want to ask, like, what makes Beloit stand out, so that then we can start to build action plans around that. So those two jumped out at us as two really top goals. And again, it doesn't mean that the other goals aren't important and aren't things that we wouldn't present to the board as a part of either a weekly board update or a board presentation around student achievement, or if the board had questions about wanting to know more about a process or procedures within the district. Those two were the two that really jumped out at us.
Thank you.
Board Member Delgado.
Thank you, Dr. Keiser. I really like the presentation that you have provided. I think that when it comes to organizational change, it's best to take an approach of prioritizing because, like John said, having that buy-in from your staff members, I think it's going to be easier to focus on particular things rather than to have all 5 goals. I think that you lose interest and you lose that motivation when you're working with so many changes at a time. So I appreciate that. And just wanted to ask, with the goal of 75%, which I think if we focus, on it and really put our minds to it, that's a very reachable goal. So is there a possibility that once we reach that goal, that maybe we can increase that goal and have it to an 80 or to a 90, until we meet that 100? And then another question is, would we be able to have like a tracking system for students that are not meeting that goal or that fail to reach that point? How is that going to be tracked?
That's two great questions. So yes, really are talking about organizational change, and when we think about how do you change an organization, you're really talking about changing the mindset and the beliefs within that organization. So focusing in on that first one as an example here, if we were working on this and we started to build a tracking mechanism and we realized that we're going to easily attain this goal halfway through the year, there's no reason or rationale to say you should just stop there and just say, well, we've said it and now we know we're gonna achieve it and we're gonna move forward. That doesn't help the organization. The organization only gets better when it is stretching for a goal that it feels is just out of reach unless we do some really significant effort on our part to try to reach that. So it is incumbent upon us as a administration that if we say, yep, we're going to meet this goal by December, we should change it at that point and say, what is a more realistic number? Should it be 90%? And the idea of continuous improvement is exactly that we the simple metaphor is the plan, do, study, act. So you plan, you make a plan, you study exactly how you're going to achieve that. You start to work on that, and as you are, doing the work, you are studying your results, and then you're making adjustments as you go through that process. So it's cyclical and it's ongoing as you go through this. So as we move through, whichever goals end up being decided upon, as well as any goals that we set, we should be using the same process. Just for the board's clarity, when I first came on board and I was invited into the school improvement team planning process, I talked to them about the same sorts of expectations, that their goals that they set is based on their research and their analysis of their school data. However, if they set a goal and that goal is something that they know that they're going to attain, they didn't set the goal well enough. They should be always striving for it. And it's okay if you don't quite make it. A study of highly effective organizations across several different industries really says that high-performing organizations hit between 70 and 80% of their goals that they set for themselves. And the reason is if you go below that 70%, you're stressing too much. You've set the bar so far out there, so high that you're never going to attain it, and then you kind of get dismayed. But if you set it so low that you're hitting over 90% of your goals, you're kind of, you're really not pushing your organization forward. So you always want to be in that mode that it's okay if you don't meet the goal. It's the process that really counts. Did that help, Board Member Delgado?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Board Member Levy.
Very briefly, I appreciate the information that you've laid out, and if I'm hearing you correctly, that you fully expect to hit that 75% mark before the end of this year. Are you open to having that goal at 100%?
Yeah, I'm open that if we feel that we're going to hit that goal, we would adjust it at a moment's notice. So I think I and my team feel that 100% is, I don't think we're going to hit 100%, but I think one of the things that's in our action step is that we really need to have a system, and we have a program called EduClimber that we can dump our data in, so things like attendance, achievement data, and grades. Once we have that set up, we'll actually have our first chance to really take a look at the data and say, what is realistic? If it's too low, we would up that. But the district goal is designed to set a starting point and then be a living document from there. So to be clear, I'm not opposed to it. I think that's too high at this point.
Okay, so it sounds like no, so you would be opposed to starting it at 100, correct?
Starting at 100, I think is too high, yes. I think 75 is a good starting
Thank
point.
you.
All right. So there are a lot of great questions that came about in that first one. So just being mindful, if would it be more beneficial to the board if we go through each one and just ask clarifying questions, or does the board want to go and start discussing from the board's perspective which of the goals it feels are the highest priority?
Right now, I think the best way to go would be to discuss which ones are the highest priority, because they are posted, we've had time to read them and review them, so they're online for the public also.
Board Member Jacobs?
I agree with Mr. President. I think that we should, if I heard you correctly, Kaya, I think we need to narrow it down to our top two.
Board Member Miller?
Oh.
I was pretty much just going to say what Board Member Larson and Jacob said, but I guess just going back to Board Member Levy's earlier point, will there be some kind of like board or like update information just kind of on the other goals as we go? I assume, would that come in a board update, or how do you anticipate you would report that out for the others?
That's a great question. So the way I would view this is with the board saying that these are board established strategic goals, the expectation is the administration will bring updates to the board around this. So the anticipation would be to do a presentation to the board, either through the superintendent's board report or a separate board report during one of the committee meetings to present on those goals throughout the year. Whether the board could establish a set number, or I would anticipate at least 3, probably one shortly after the first 100 days, probably one shortly after the second 100 days, and then one right after the school year ends to do kind of a year in review.
Would it be, that's wonderful. As an outcome of this meeting, would it be appropriate or possible to kind of like walk away with the understanding that you'll provide us kind of like, this is when you would expect to hear like these updates? And when we get those updates, would it be possible to get kind of an overview report on all 5, just so we can anticipate like, okay, this is the meeting where Dr. Keiser is going to give us updates on those 5 strategic goals, even though they're the 2 that they'll be much more robust with metrics, et cetera, for the purposes of the eval. However, that way the district as a whole kind of gets like the broad brush picture of where we are on all 5 goals. Does that make sense? Like, could we just hear about kind of like where we are at all 5 at the same time in each report?
My pause is only to reflect on, so you're asking that I prioritize 2 but still work on all 5?
Well, you said that like all 5, I mean, by working on the 2, the 5 we're gonna probably cover our bases. So like, for example, let's say, for instance, that we don't choose the literacy goal as a strategic goal. At the board meeting where you're giving that update, could you just touch on and say like, one of these strategic goals was also for literacy, and even though that's not one of our prioritized ones here, just so that we're touching on all 5, and honestly, like if there's nothing to report, we can just say, okay, at this time there's nothing to report. This way, like, I feel it, for me anyway, it feels a little more organized to me, like this is still the direction that we're going, like these are our goalposts, and that way all of us at the same time can kind of see where we are on our journey toward those 5 pieces, even though strategically we're going to be focused on the 2. So we just don't lose track of that this isn't a greater picture, kind of, you know what I mean?
I appreciate that clarification. So
Sure.
the ones that we would prioritize, we would set up I would work with Ms. Shope to calendar in those presentations, but the other ones where they would naturally fall into the board calendar, we would provide updates on that.
And that works for me. I just want to make sure that as I'm excited to prioritize. I think it's very important for growth that we prioritize and narrow down. I just don't want, in the process of our prioritization and narrowing down, to lose focus on where we are in the big picture of the priorities that we've identified. So thank you for working that through with me.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Levy.
Thank you. In the spirit of efficiency, I would recommend that Michelle does roll call, not for a formal vote on a motion, but just so each board member can say, these are my votes for the 2 priority. And I recommend, because they're not numbered, that, like, for example, mine would be 2 literacy and 5 placement. But give that kind of 1-word descriptor to make sure that your vote is being counted accurately. And I'm hoping at the end of that quick exercise, we'll have 2 clear goals that we're ready to move forward with, and then you and your team would build out with more detail.
I like that idea. So I'm kind of spreading out the pieces here. Board Member Wong.
Real quick, I would suggest when you do the goals, I like the idea that Board Member Miller had mentioned as far as getting updates on that. But if we just basically state we have the level 1 goals will be the 2 that we are the priorities, and then the level 2 would be the other 3.
All right. Board Member Jacobs.
So when we say our top 2, is that the proper time to just give a very brief, not description, a very brief thought process behind why we thought those 2 were the most important, or will that just kind of, I don't know. Well, actually, I think we should do that. How does everyone feel about that?
I think when you have the opportunity to share your top 2, I feel you can share a rationale if you feel comfortable doing so.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Or else I'll have Ms. Shope go through each of the board members, and then you can share your top 2. All right.
Delgado?
Okay, so my top 2, my number 1 would be number 2 of the goals.
Mm-hmm.
And then my number 2 is number 1 of the goals.
Okay.
Levy?
Can you repeat that? I missed that last one.
The second goal, which was literacy, and the first goal, which was the academic and social emotional needs during a pandemic.
Levy?
Number 2, because it's the only academic goal that we have listed, so I think that's very important. And number 5, because eventually we are going to be face-to-face. It's important now. It's going to become even more important about how our students are placed with IEPs and 504s, and that our students are consistently treated with discipline up to and including expulsion, and that our administrative team is also consistent in how they present those cases.
Thank you.
Larson?
Number 2, literacy. And then teacher retention. I should say staff retention.
Thank you.
Anderson.
So I would say number 2, so for literacy, just because we're giving kids building blocks to continue learning with that. And then number 4 for staff retention, because then we can focus and keep building our teachers and other staff members.
Thank you.
Jacobs.
Number 2, literacy, and number 1, the academic and social emotional needs, because our babies will have been out approximately 6 months by November, without counting summer school, so 5 solid months. And I'm extremely concerned about the ones that were already in gray areas, how much they've dipped. And this, to me, it goes hand. It is an academic goal as well as social, emotional. And I just cannot stress enough that our kids are going to be falling farther behind. And I also want to stress that is not the teacher's fault. I believe our teachers are doing an outstanding job, doing their very best to reach our kids right now. It's not the same thing as being in person. And I'm very, very concerned about what is happening with our kids that are not at Tier 1 engagement right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wong.
I will join the group and do number 2, literacy, because literacy has been on the radar for a long time and it continues to be a problem. And I am going to, number 2 will be staff retention. I think that this district has bled employees for way too long, and I think that the results that we have and the struggles that we've had over the years, a lot of that is directly related to the turnover that we've had on a consistent basis. Great teams are built with strong leadership and with retaining great employees long term. So I'm going to stick to those 2.
Thank you.
Miller.
Well, I'm in a fun position, so I obviously want to say literacy, but since that's obviously going to be a choice, so admittedly I'm changing based on my pecking order here. I'm going to vote then for SEL for 1 and for 5 for discipline, and my reason for that is that while staff retention is very important to me, I think that one of the key ways that we retain staff is by offering administratively supported, well-funded, well-guided, and well-PD'd approaches to social emotional learning and to discipline support. And so I think that if we super focus, considering that we're in a pandemic and everybody's mental health is just in the trash right now, I think to me, outside of literacy, the 2 top choices for me would be social emotional. And I think that sort of the other side of the coin for social emotional is that correct placement. And I hope that by investing heavily in those, we would be able to retain staff by offering them those supports.
Thank you. So you voted for the first one and the 5th one?
I am 1 and 5, correct, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So what I see here is we have 6 who identified the second goal, which is the literacy. Oh, sorry. Board Member Jacobs?
No, I'm sorry, Superintendent Keiser. I go ahead, because I just have a little bit more I wanted to say about the first goal. So please go ahead. Thank you.
No, please go for it. I was just going to summarize.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking we have to keep in mind our 4K and our K students that aren't in a classroom right now. And I think all of our goals are very important. They all are very, very important. but we are in a pandemic, and we do not know yet what consequences that's going to have on our kids. We can guess, but we won't know until those babes are back in their seats in school. And I just can't stress enough. I'm really, and I'm so worried about the youngest students that we simply, for example, teaching reading, teaching a child to read is totally different when you're trying to do it online a few hours a day versus in the school building all day long. And I don't know how we can ignore the pandemic right now, because it is here, it is real, and we don't know how long it's going to last this year. And it is having a very real effect on our kids, that I know for a fact. Thanks.
Thank you. So from everyone's responses here, goal number 2 had 6 board members identifying that. And then we have a tie for second between the first goal, the academic and social emotional needs of a child during a pandemic, and staff retention. And so I have said tonight 2 goals. In the past, when Dr. Neerad was here, he said 2 or 3 goals. I would prefer 2, but I will look to the board to say, do we want to try to prioritize these 2, or do you want I and my team to work on 3? Board Member Anderson.
So if you have 3, how possible is it, like, how hard or challenging do you think it'd be for your team to really focus on those 3 versus the 2?
From my experience in doing this work in prior roles, in prior situations, 3 is challenging. 2 is very doable. Simply because you're still doing all the other work of running a district. Because what you're really doing is you're prioritizing, roughly an extra 20% of your time with your teams on these goals. So splitting that extra time across 2 goals versus splitting your time across 3 goals is different. That being said, the reason why I look at 3 is because one of them is really in the vein, looking at the vein from an operations and HR side, where the other 2 are squarely focused within people services and teaching and learning, which does create a little bit of just, separation at that point. The work really comes back to myself as the superintendent, working with the executive directors and making sure that we keep these going forward. So challenging, but I would say doable because of the fact that one of them, not all 3 are taxing the same two departments. Oh, sorry, Board Member Miller.
Thank you. So, we are a school district in the business of caring for and serving people. And I think that if we put our kind of collective focus on the struggle that we're all experiencing as human beings in these really kind of scary, unprecedented times, my urge is to take that leap and to do the 3. Because I want to prioritize, obviously literacy, it's our only academic goal on there. We are a school district, we have to have that. I want us to prioritize the well-being of all of the humans that are involved in our organizations. But so my question to you is, if we decide to go with the 3, which would strongly be my preference for those reasons, would it be reasonable for you to bring back to us, unless you happen to have a thought right now, what additional supports would be necessary that we could possibly allocate or move around to make that more achievable so that we aren't overly straining? You know, it kind of goes against the grain of caring for ourselves in a pandemic if we're stressing everybody out unreasonably. So could you talk to the point of like what additional supports might be necessary, or did you perhaps already just touch on that because it's sort of in two different areas?
Part of it is I touched on with having it in two different areas. So when we think about the first goal and the second goal, those are goals that really speak to the heart of both pupil services and teaching and learning working as one unit as the core of our district, right? Those two departments, you can't run a district without both halves, right? You can't have just a teaching and learning with no support side, and you can't run with just a support side and no teaching and learning. They are intertwined in that way. So from that standpoint, those two departments are working on those two goals, which in and of itself provides that same parameter. On the teacher retention, we talk about climate and culture, so it does spill over into the work that around literacy and academics and social emotional learning. But really, when we're talking about teacher retention, we're really starting off with that point of doing a root cause analysis around teacher retention, which we've already done some really good work on at the board level because of Tracy and doing the climate survey and exit survey. It's starting with that data and digging into it. Additionally, I would say the literacy goal, that goal is not a one-year goal. To really isolate where the gap is and then do a root cause analysis of why that gap exists and what are the strategies that are going to close that gap, we're going to uncover a whole host of things. So really the team, that teaching and learning and pupil services team, is really going to be identifying action steps of what they can accomplish in that first goal. So you've got three competing things. You've got one goal that really focuses in outside of teaching and learning pupil services. You got two goals that squarely fit into that, and of those, one of those is really a multi-year goal. So you can break it up in that way. So thinking strategically from a systems point of view, I think, while I say it's challenging, it's, I think, doable if I break it up in those two ways.
I really appreciate your systems approach and like kind of your reasoning there, and thank you for entertaining doing the three.
Yep. Board Member Jacobs.
Is one of the things, if I'm correct, with teacher retention are the overwhelming needs that our students come with. Is that correct?
Can you restate that? I apologize.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I'm really in favor of 2 goals versus 3. And with one of the teacher retention issues, if I am correct on this, is that they're overwhelmed by the needs of their students. Is that correct? They have large class sizes. We've got kids that are all over the board. I mean, they can have kids in a classroom that are, differences in grade levels or reading levels. Mm-hmm. Correct. So when you look at it from that viewpoint, I'm thinking the staff will be happier. We will be not happier, but we will be taking stress and alleviating stress if we really have a good handle on what's going on to our kids right now and the effect of what this pandemic is having on them with the academic and social emotional needs, because if we don't really understand and have a handle on that and are looking at that, when we come back to school, a lot of these kids are going to be lower than they were. I mean, talk about a summer slump. It's going to be a half a year slump. I'm a firm believer in kids first. If I was a community member or parent, and as a principal, my staff understood, kids will always come first in my book. Staff are a very close second, but nothing is more important than our kids. And I'm sure you can hear the passion in my voice. I am worried, sick about the kids that are being left behind right now because they're not in the classroom. And I really think that we need to put our emphasis on those first two goals. And I also think that it's going to make your job and the executive team and the principals all the way down to I don't want to say all the way down, but it does trickle down all the way into the buildings. And I think that's going to make their jobs a lot easier if we do everything in our power to make sure we know what's going on with our kids right now. And I don't believe we have a good handle on it. But if we put that emphasis on the academic and social, especially the 75% of students at Tier 1 engagement, that's for the public that doesn't understand that. That means we're only saying 75% of our 100% of kids will be at Tier 1. That means that they are online, that they should be at grade level, they should be getting what they need. And I cannot stress enough, I'm worried sick about that. I think we need to be putting our students first. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Wong.
Well, as we've all stated, I mean, these are all very important goals, but I think some other things that we have to be conscious of at this point is we've gone into this pandemic and this school year, I think, with a lot of unknowns. As we have progressed through it, I think that we've all become realizing that, and the first thing is nobody likes change. Absolutely nobody likes change. You talk to any group, any organization, and there's going to be a lot of resistance to any type of change, which is what we've seen this year already. But fortunately, I think that as we have progressed through this, we've discovered that people can change and people are finding new ways to do things, different ways that they've done before. Even our students have stepped up to the plate, perhaps in ways that we never thought that they would have. I know I spoke to my two boys, and as far as the engagement that they've had, which I would expect to be very good, but also they said that, it's pretty much pretty consistent throughout the class. With this being said, I would say that, I think that we haven't had any goals in this district. Well, our strategic plan ended this last year, and my fear is I don't want to flounder for longer, and I'm glad that we're doing this now. But I think that with that, along with the fact that, as you had stated, the goals are separate from different departments, that we have resources available. We're not stretching them thin. I say that we do go for the 3 goals with the idea that we can accomplish them. And I don't think there's anything wrong in trying to push people and realizing, I think that maybe there could be a lot of excitement developed throughout the district because we are concentrating on 3 goals that we can say, yes, we can accomplish this. But yet we are not only helping our students with literacy, we're also helping the SEL needs, but also we're also conscious of staff and realizing that they play an important key in this as well. So my vote for is to do the 3 and to stick with that. And I think, Dr. Keiser, you had said that you feel confident that you can accomplish that. So
I appreciate that. And yes, when we think about the interconnections, if students are feeling successful in classrooms and the teachers are feeling successful in teaching and supporting the students, what you're going to end up having is the staff are going to be more satisfied because they feel like they're accomplishing, the students feel like they're learning. that spills over into the whole climate and culture, which then directly affects retention. So again, that's the piece of it. In working with building principals who have the same situation where we're like, well, I can't like not prioritize this over that because we got to do them both. Well, yes, you have to do them both, but the reality is you only have a finite amount of time during the day, and if you're going to prioritize everything as level one, then what are you really accomplishing? And that's why when you start to dig into this, you start to say, okay, if we focus in on these things, what we might find is that from the retention piece, a root cause is the social emotional needs and the academic needs and the literacy that we're already working on. And if we see that link, we can say even more evidence that if we do well here, it's going to spill over here. So that's the and I'll say it this way, and some people may take it differently. That's the fun part about doing system level work, is you start to see how these things are interrelated with one another. And I know that with the new executive director of teaching and learning coming on board, working with Ms. Beavers as bringing these two departments together, this will be a work stream that those two departments can coalesce and start to build a team structure across departmental team structure around these goals. And as an executive director team and superintendent, we can monitor those and bring those back. So, Board Member Miller.
Thank you. I was just gonna, I was reflecting on what Board Member Jacobs said, and I just want to point out that I agree very much with your I mean, I really appreciate the passion that you use to kind of speak your point there, and I see you're going to weigh in as well after me anyway. I just wanted to state that, you know, our students' learning environment is our teachers' working environment, and I think that by focusing on staff retention, it's actually going to augment our kids' learning environment for all the reasons that you gave, and Dr. Keiser just made that very lovely point about the interconnectivity of what we're doing. So that's all I had.
Board Member Jacobs.
Oh, thank you, Board Member Miller. I'm trying to calm my passion down, but I still strongly believe that our staff are going to be happier if right now we are spending more time on those first two goals so that when those kids are back in session, they're going to be in a better frame of mind and they're going to be in a better place academically, if that's where our main focus is right now. And Dr. Keiser, I am concerned because initially you said that you would prefer the 2 goals versus the 3. And I understand why you said that, and I absolutely agree with it. And I think board members, we should perhaps just think about that a little bit too, that initially that's what our superintendent said, and he's in charge of running our district. So just food for thought. Thank you. And I'm trying not to be quite as passionate.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any more questions or discussion, or are we looking for a motion, Dr. Keiser, to like officially adopt 3 goals as our tier 1 goals, with the others being secondary to that? I mean, what would you like us to do?
What I'm walking away at this point, and I'm fine with consensus if people are there, that there, based on the vote, we have a tie for second, and that I appreciate Board Member Jacobs' comments and conversations. I would feel differently if there was a tie where all 3 of them were affecting 1 or 2 departments that were doing all of the work. In this case, it brings a comprehensiveness to that. Through the conversations, I'm walking away with academic literacy, literacy being a resounding priority, the social emotional needs and academics during a pandemic, and the staff retention. Again, staff retention is not a one-year thing, that's a long-term thing. Those three pieces being worked on with 3 reports coming before the board kind of shortly after each of the 100-day cycles have ended. And the other 2, so the placement and the behaviors fitting into the board calendar as those topics come up within the board's work. That's what I'm walking away with. If the board is of like mind, that's the work that I'll have my team start working on beginning tomorrow.
I want to throw this out to the board. I guess the reason that I am thinking in my mind of having a vote to like formally adopt these goals is to maybe like put some excitement around them, or say, hey, we're doing it, like, saying the board formally adopted like in a vote or whatever these goals, versus like the board reached consensus around these goals. Am I overthinking? Like, I mean, I'm interested in what other people are thinking about that. Board Member Jacobs first, I think.
No, I agree, Mr. President. I like the idea of voting on them, but and maybe I'm the minority, and that's okay. But I also would be interested in wondering if we have further discussion on the 2 versus 3 goals, or if that's Dr. Kieser's call, or if we need to vote on it, or is that a moot point? I'm not clear where we're at on that.
I mean, I don't think we have consensus yet, and I think we could, we're starting to spin our wheels a little bit, coming around in circles, which I think is, another benefit to having a vote, because I think it could, I want everyone to feel like they've had their say, but I also want to, okay, we've talked about this, everybody's had the opportunity to share their views, and then this is what we're going to do going forward.
I agree.
Miller.
And then Board Member Miller, please.
I was ready to make a motion, but if you want to come back to me, are we good to make a motion, or do you want to have more discussion?
No, I think we are really ready for that.
Because we could actually do this without me having to make that other motion, right? Are we there? Oh my gosh, it's the best night ever. Okay, because I move then to adopt literacy, social emotional learning, and staff retention as our Tier 1 short-term district goals.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the social emotional learning during the pandemic, staff retention, and the literacy goal as our Tier 1 strategic goals for period. Are there any other questions? I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry, do we need to say short-term strategic goals or district goals?
Yeah, do we want to add that in for the 2021 school year? Why
don't we do that? That sounds good.
Okay. So the motion is to adopt the social emotional learning, staff retention, and then the literacy goal for our Tier 1 strategic goals for the 2021 school year. Any other questions or discussion?
I do.
Okay. I was just looking. I wasn't sure if.
Oh, it's okay. So, if I'm just trying to understand the consensus and stuff. So if I don't agree with 3 goals, but I agree with 2 of the, I'm just asking for clarity. I mean, would I vote nay then because I don't believe in the 3 goals?
That would be correct.
Okie dokie.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, we are adopting 3 goals then?
Yes.
Okay, which was number 1, number 2, and then the staff retention. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm going to be the nay one.
Okay, so the motion passes 6-1. Good work, everyone. I'm so excited. This is something that we've needed for a long time, and it's great to start this different phase of our work, which it's fantastic. Okay, thank you, Dr. Keyser and your team for all of the time and spent on those goals. And then, and I look forward to the updates that we're going to receive.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so the next item for our workshop is the superintendent evaluation tool. So again, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Keyser.
Got me taking a drink here.
Point of order, Kyle. Should we do our meeting extension motion before Dr. Keyser gets started?
This meeting, it's only for 2 hours, and so this meeting didn't start until like at 7:30. So we're good for another half hour or so. Thank you, though.
Okay, thank you. I thought it was the post-it time. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
All righty. So I've shared in the past 2 sample assessment tools and then a draft tool, assessment tool that with the board. I brought that tool back with updates, mainly tweaks to the language based on Dr. Bale's presentation, and again, kind of merging the specificity of language of one tool, the metrics and comments section of another tool. So this evaluation kind of breaks up the work of the superintendent into several different pieces, ranging from relationships to management to finance and fiscal, relationships with the community, leadership, and then even student achievement, which is important that we just got done with the short-term goals because the student achievement piece at the end really speaks towards having those established. So with that being said, I offer it up to the board for consideration as the evaluation tool to be used this year, and open it up to the board for comments, questions, and discussion. So let's see here. I have Board Member Jacobs and then Board Member Levy. Board Member Jacobs.
Well, I'm just talking a lot tonight, aren't I, Superintendent Keyser? Think I'd had caffeine or something, but I didn't. So I just have a couple questions on it. It looks really good overall, I think. When you say that the superintendent will supervise the principals, where did that little one go? If something, oh shoot, where did it go? Supervises the principals. I'm still looking.
Under effective leadership of staff.
I'm sorry?
Under effective leadership of staff, it's the third one down.
Okay, let me go. Oh, for goodness sake. Does that mean that you're going to, okay, supervises educator, what does that mean exactly?
So all of our staff use the educator effectiveness model for supervision evaluation, and I am the supervisor for all of the principals. Principals supervise their assistant principals.
So you'll be doing their evaluations?
Correct.
Yes, wonderful. And did I miss in here somewhere about climate and culture?
You know, I should have this memorized as much as I looked at it.
Surprised you don't.
Well, no, the last one.
Last
The
one.
second one, leverages policy, operations, system processes, and culture to meet board goals. Or the second, no, effective leadership of staff.
Okay. Oh. Let's see. Yes, the second one in the same section. Thank you. It was right above the one that we were just talking about. Board Member Huang shared. Leverages policies, operations, systems and processes, and culture to meet board goals.
So when you say the culture, that refers to the staff culture?
Yes.
The building, the climate? Okay.
So
Thank
it's
you.
culture inclusive, so it can be district, building, culture, yes.
Okay, just as you know, we've had a rather large problem with that, so I just wanted to make sure that that was in there. And I don't know if I'm the only one, or if maybe that needs to be a little bit more clear or something separate, or, I'll go with what others feel. Thank you.
Okay. Board Member Levy.
Thank you. I have a few, so I won't be offended if you cut me off in between and go round robin. Just a heads up. The first question that I have is the length of the evaluation tool. It goes from fall of 2020 to fall of 2021. And it's my understanding that your contract ends in June. So why would the tool not be executed before the end of your contract?
That I honestly didn't. I just put that on there because it said fall 20 dash. I did not honestly think about the start and end dates. I just put the last two digits in for the year.
So would it be more reasonable to say fall of 2020 or even I would like to put in months. So if we did, I don't know, from your start date to May of 2021, and that way we would have your evaluation wrapped up before the end of your one-year contract?
Yeah, yes, I would say that from the, and I am foggy on if it was in the presentation or in policy, the timeline would be before the end of the contract. The evaluation would just be, it could say from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021, but the evaluation would be done the summative evaluation would be done before the end of the contract.
I would love to have a date on that because I'm sure at the end of the year things will come up. And if we know that this is a point on our calendar that we need to get to this and do all the preliminary work, that would be really helpful for me. Next on my list, under management skills and abilities, it says mobilizing staff towards meeting board goals. I have no idea what that means or how that would be evaluated.
Yeah, so in this case, it would be, and again, all of the wording here is up for discussion in terms of the board. So mobilizing staff to meet board goals would simply mean that how am I leveraging the staff in execution of the goals that we just set for the for our short-term goals. That is one avenue, but the board also has its board goals, which within that are several action items in which you could evaluate me on that aspect as well, on how I'm leveraging the staff to do to meet those goals. So, i.e., do I do all the presentations and I never bring any other staff in front of that? So that could be one avenue, just one, off the top of my head example of how the board might look at that. To your point.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And
sorry, go for it. Nope.
No, my thinking is just that I would love for this tool to be efficient and very clear I think that's going to be a win-win for both sides, so you know exactly what the expectations are. So as much as we can get rid of vague language, or if we find that one of these is unnecessary, I think that would be really great for all involved. And I hope we're treating this as kind of like a first read. I wasn't clear if the goal was to adopt this evening. So just food for thought. And then very quickly, I think I just have two other points. Under student achievement, the items listed under student achievement don't strike me as having very much at all to do directly with impacting students' achievement. That sounded very redundant. So my point is, under student achievement, there's two items. Collaborate with the board to establish and monitor board and strategic plan. Like for me, that's not directly related to student achievement, because like with the goals we just went through, only one of those was academic. So if we could get more clear language as to how this is student focused, that would be really helpful for me. And then lead departments in working towards meeting set board and district goals. Again, that language feels very absent of student center, so it doesn't seem congruent with having that under student achievement. So food for thought. And then my final point was, you had spoken, I believe it was our policy and personnel, when we were talking about equity being in topics, and I'm paraphrasing you, so please let me know if I'm misrepresenting what you said. But the notes that I took down were that there's a line in the job description for, I believe, the director of bilingual education, and that a lot of that equity work will fall on you, I believe was what you said. So if your position is that you are responsible for a lot of that equity work, I just don't see it reflected in this tool. And so I would love, again, if we're looking at this as a first read, you would make recommendations that weave parameters for that equity work so we can be very clear on how that's being evaluated. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback and suggestions on refining the language. Board Member Wong.
My only comment or question is in regards to some of these items on here, and just so as a board member, I know that, what should I be conscious of or be aware of throughout the year to be able to provide a good evaluation of your jobs. And I'm looking at this, like one of them is, where was it at before? Oh, coaches and develops district and school leaders. I mean, now, it's not, I don't think that we're going to come out and watch you in action doing that, but I'm just kind of curious, okay, so what is it that I would do as a board member to be able to get information that would provide me the ability to grade you on that? And there's a few other topics in here as well that, I just want to make sure that it's fair to you and it's fair to us and that we're doing our job properly.
I appreciate that. And I would say in terms of taking your comments and Board Member Levy's comments, the goal of the tool is to have enough specificity, and in part, this tool is for me to say, here's evidence. I bring into this tool evidence of each of these components for the board to evaluate and say, so in part, you might be in a building in which I'm leading a discussion or an administrative retreat, and you might see elements of that face to face. But the expectation would also be that I would bring into this tool links, documents, board presentations in which you would be able to read through each of these and say, nope, I don't have any evidence of this, so this might be an area that needs improvement, or, yep, I see evidence of that, but it's not, exceptional work. You've addressed it, and then the comments can go from there. And this is a tool that's supposed to be a growing tool, so the first time you might not see all of the elements, but over the course of the year when you get to the spring, there should be enough evidence that has accumulated for board members to go through each of these pieces. So absolutely, if you're not sure how I would demonstrate that through bringing evidence to you, that's the clarification that we need to have.
Thank you for that information. And one of them that I was looking at as well was, and it's service to people served. The second item, which is very interesting to me, and I think that it could be very good, but I'm also concerned about cherry picking, and that's collects feedback from staff and community and uses the information to adjust district plans. I like the idea of getting feedback from individuals, but also I'm not sure how that can be done in a fair and impartial manner. I want to make sure that it's done right. And perhaps that's something just to think about as you continue to build this out. And there might be input from other board members as well.
I appreciate that, and I would say for that particular one, collecting feedback from staff, having that written that way, in part is, one, am I doing it? And two, it is absolutely fair feedback if the board or even individuals on the board feel that I am cherry picking feedback from that and giving me feedback that says, we feel like you are not being inclusive of that. So in part of, you can put the specificity in there, but you can also put it in there and saying, am I doing that? Am I doing that holistically, or am I doing it, as you said, kind of cherry picking which groups that I'm going to? All of that's fair game and makes the tool robust in the sense that you can be, yep, you're doing it, but you're not doing it the way in a manner that we as the board feel is appropriate for our expectations.
My hope would be that throughout the year you're getting feedback from us on an ongoing basis. So nothing should be a surprise at year end to say, oh wow, yeah, you didn't do this. I mean, it should be very clear, and we should all have a clear path as far as how we should be able to evaluate you. But thanks for the work on this, and I think that as it's puts on there as a draft, I look forward to the finished product.
Thank you, Board Member Miller.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I want to echo that. I love the format, and a lot of really great thought went into this, and I appreciate that very much. I just wrote down a few things I noticed when I looked it over the other day. Okay, so I also noticed that under student achievement, there's no mention of anything with equity, and I would just hope that we're holding all administration accountable for equity, and I would love to hear a little more from you about what you feel a fair metric would be to use for your role. So I want to put a pin in that, though, because I just have 3 other quick ones, and maybe we can circle back. I was hoping that we could include an adjective like positive or effective in front of fosters like a working relationship. I think it's under the effective leadership of staff piece there. Like fostering a working relationship could be like a poor working relationship. So I don't really care what adjective you choose, but maybe if we could just put that in there. I think it'll be easier for us to gather evidence and be like, wow, like look how effective Dr. Kieser was, and you know what I mean? So I just think that would be beneficial when it comes time to actually use the tool. So that's some feedback there. The other 2, I also noted what Board Member Jacobs had noticed. I feel like we should, and I think you probably already got the feedback from her, I just had noted just climate and culture. Like it's very important, I think, for leadership of staff to foster a positive, collaborative, respectful climate and culture, all that kind of good stuff. And then just the last one was with the community piece. I would love to see something, and I think you've got a pretty good scope there. I would like to see something about collaborating with civic and community organizations, because I feel like particularly with COVID, this is the eval for this year, and we're dealing with the pandemic, and I think we've already gotten some good momentum going with community partnerships and with the city. That's something I'd like to see more of, because I think that's going to really effectively help us serve our students. So I would like to see that maybe just that collaboration specific piece under the community stuff with both community and civic organizations. That was my feedback, but everybody else can weigh in on that as well. Unless I'm going too fast, I just wanted to circle back. I'm curious to hear what you think a fair metric would be to use for a superintendent's role in ensuring that there's equity in not just in student achievement, although I think that's probably where it would go in your framework, but just equity across the board, behavior and discipline, access, the whole deal.
Thank you, Board Member Miller. Yes, in part, trying to think through from the standpoint of my role in the organization and being the lead learner and establishing the expectation. And so in part, correct. I think it's student achievement, but I also have to think and reflect because I could see it perhaps in other areas, for instance, in setting expectations for the leadership team, and then even under service of people served. So what I'm definitely hearing is a first draft and coming back. So let me reflect on that and put some language down.
I think that sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Board Member Delgado.
Thank you so much for putting this together for us. Honestly, I would have thought that would have been the job of the board to put this together for you, because I feel that, it's unfair for you to come up with like all this stuff and then, us changing it all over. I can see that you put the thought through your perspective, not necessarily through the board perspective. So I would have imagined, or at least figured, that this would have been something that the board should have put together for you. Just a thought on that. But I do agree with a lot of the things that the other board members echoed out. It's important to have some type of equity in there, and a lot of other aspects that they recommended. Just one thing, is there anything that we're doing as far as you self-evaluating yourself? I know that I have used different tools when evaluating supervisors, where they actually provide their own self-evaluation first. And I think that that's actually a great tool for us to utilize, in trying to see, how what I see that you have accomplished matches, what your viewpoint is as far as what your accomplishments have been.
I appreciate your comments, and you're absolutely right. The evaluation tool for superintendent should be a collaboration between the board and superintendent. So in part, this is an attempt to bring a tool to, so instead of starting with a blank page, we're starting with something that we can react to and build to. So that was the intent and the expectation that was placed for me to bring this to all of you for this feedback. And as far as the self-evaluation, absolutely, once this tool is set, the board as a collective could ask that, okay, Dr. Keyser, please go through this and see where you would feel, and use that and have that as a piece of evidence for the board to consider. In part, the way the structure is set up, by providing evidence on a regular basis ahead of the formative and then ultimately the summative feedback, I would be going through a form of self-evaluation, because I'm going to be going through each of these lines and saying, okay, what have I done, or what things would provide evidence of this? And so by doing that, I do go through a regular self-evaluation of that. So I appreciate your comments.
Thank you. I appreciate the efforts you have put into this.
Board Member Levy.
So I think my final recommendation is that I would love to see an equity goal under each header, and I am certain that you and Ms. Shope are going to rewatch this tape so that you can gather all the feedback and make sure that nothing is missed. But since we're looking at this as a first read, could you, and not necessarily tonight, but at some point after you've had a chance to process, kind of email us out a deadline that will work best for you? Because after we reflect on what we've heard other board members say, et cetera, if we have additional feedback that we would like to provide for the tool before we see it again, potentially as a finished product, if you could get a date out to us that you would like to receive all that information, that would be very helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate that suggestion. I definitely will take the opportunity to put in the feedback, and then I like that approach of emailing the tool out to everyone with a deadline for providing additional feedback before the next time we discuss this as a full board.
Is there any other questions or comments regarding the evaluation tool for the interim superintendent? All right, seeing none, we are just shy of our 2-hour mark. So we are all done tonight. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned. Have a great night.
Do you need a vote?
Thanks, everybody. It was really nice to see you all.
Oh, no,
Good night.
Good night.
Yep. Thank you. I didn't know if like a workshop you need to.
No.